Last winter, I was asked to be a bridesmaid at my best friend's wedding in Maine. I booked a hotel and packed my bags to go. Upon arrival at the airport, I caught a taxi that drove me straight to my hotel. As we pulled in, the hotel seemed to look fairly nice, which was good. I've stayed at hotels in the past that looked great online, but completely different and dilapidated in person. I checked in with the guy at the front, who seemed to be a college-aged kid. He was very nice and showed me to my room, even going as far as carrying one of my bags. I settled in and eventually took a nap, since I'd been up since 3 a.m. When I woke up, I checked my phone, realizing I'd slept for 4 hours, and it was already 5:30. Since I didn't pack any food, I quickly searched for nearby restaurants on my phone. I probably should have scoped out the area beforehand, as I instantly regretted the nearby options that showed up. There was a Burger King that was 5 minutes away, but anyone who knows me knows that it's my least favorite restaurant on the planet. Besides that, the rest of the restaurants were 15 minutes away or more. Since I didn't have a car and didn't want to have it delivered due to my atrocious financial situation, I reluctantly decided that I'd walk into Burger King. The walk wasn't far, and I didn't mind getting a bit of fresh air, even though it was probably 20 degrees out. I ordered a chicken salad and ate there before leaving to walk back to the hotel. I had to be up early in the morning because I had to meet with my friend at the reception hall for rehearsal. On my way back, I walked with a much quicker pace. It was a lot windier, and it made the air feel twice as cold. When I was 2 blocks away, I heard a car behind slowly approach and then come to a stop. It was a white pickup truck, and the window was rolled down. A bearded man with short hair and a baseball cap popped his head out and said, "You need a ride? You shouldn't be out here in this part of town this late." Like I said before, I didn't really do my research about the area I was staying in, so I assumed it was a bad neighborhood. He didn't seem too creepy or anything, but I replied saying no thank you and pointed up the street at my hotel, telling him I was almost back. Looking back now, I regret doing that. He paused for a few seconds, looking at the hotel, then glanced back at me, saying, "You sure? I'm headed that way." I said no thanks again, and he slowly drove off, out of sight. A couple minutes later, I got back to my hotel and watched TV before bed. As I started getting more tired, I realized that the salad wasn't holding me over like I hoped it would. I walked down to the main lobby and started looking around for a vending machine. There wasn't anyone at the desk, so I walked to the end of the hallway towards the fire exit, hoping that I'd find one. There wasn't a vending machine, but I noticed that it turned into a full-blown blizzard outside. I live in Florida, so it was quite a sight to see since I'm not used to weather like that. I stood there for a minute in a daze until I snapped out of it and walked back towards the main lobby. When I walked by, the clerk at the desk was back, but it was a different guy from earlier. He was much older, maybe in his late 50s to 60s. I walked up to him and asked if they had a vending machine anywhere, and he replied, telling me that it was down the hallway, just past the pool. I thanked him and headed that way, realizing I originally walked to the wrong end. I passed the pool and finally found the vending machine that was tucked behind a wall. I got a cookie and a bag of chips, then made my way to the main lobby area to the elevator. As I walked past the lobby, I caught something out of the corner of my eye that sent me into a loophole of anxious thoughts. I wasn't 100% certain, but I could have sworn that I saw the same man from earlier in the truck walking into the hotel entrance. I spammed the elevator button and nervously waited until I heard the ding, followed by the doors opening up. I got in and pressed level 4 right away, rushing to get back to my room. Just before the doors were about to close all the way, I heard him say, "Wait, stop." My heart was pounding as I tried to come to a reasonable solution as to why the guy was now at the hotel. I got into my room and quickly closed the door, double locking it shut. I was pretty worked up, but finally calmed down after an hour or so. The only reason I stopped worrying so much was that he didn't see which room I was staying in, so I'd at least be safe for the night. It was getting late, and it was now around 10:30. I had to be at the reception hall by 8, which was 30 minutes away, so I set my alarm for 6 a.m. Not too long after I dozed off, I was startled awake to the sound of the phone ringing beside my bed on the nightstand. I was confused as to why someone would be calling me, especially at this hour. I picked up and groggily said, "Hello?" A man's voice responded, "Sorry about the fight from earlier. I'm here now, though." My entire body froze as I recognized the voice to be the creepy guy from earlier. I was completely speechless and hung up the phone right away. I sat up in bed, feeling my heart pounding. Literally a minute after the phone call, I heard a knock at my door. The sickening feeling in my stomach only got worse, and I worked up the courage to go look through the door and see who it was. As soon as I peered through the peephole, I felt like I was going to throw up. The guy was right outside my door, wearing the same hat and clothes from earlier, just standing there. This confirmed it for me that this guy was following me. However, after a minute passed, I looked through again and saw that he was gone. I guess it was somewhat relieving to me, and I hoped that he finally gave up. I wanted to call the front desk and report it, but I was worried that the guy would be there with the clerk. I waited in my room for what felt like forever, until I built up enough courage and decided to go down there myself. As I got off the elevator, I looked into the lobby and it looked empty, so I ran over to the front desk and hit the bell at least 20 times until someone came out from the employee-only door. It wasn't any of the two guys from earlier, but a woman. I explained the situation to her, and she definitely looked concerned. She told me to wait a minute, as she called the guy who was working before her to ask about this guy I was referring to. They started talking until the girl put the phone on speaker and told me to talk to him. Up until this point, I'd been staying pretty level-headed throughout the night. That all changed when I explained my situation in detail to him. He told me that the guy said he was my husband and that we got into a fight earlier that day. He asked to call me from the front desk and explain how I'd be awake since we were just texting each other about the fight we had. He went on to convince the clerk that he wanted to surprise me by coming in person and making things up to me. I felt nauseous again, telling him that the guy clearly lied about everything and I have no idea who he is. He didn't say anything for at least 5 seconds, until he told me something that still keeps me up at night to this day. "Ma'am, I'm so sorry, but you need to know this. He booked a room right across from yours." That was when I lost all composure. I instantly started crying. I had nowhere else to go, and I was staying in a room that was right across from this creep. I asked the girl at the counter to walk back with me to my room, just to be safe. She said she would, but needed to call her manager about what to do first. I guess she had to get permission to ask a guest to leave before doing so. I told her it wasn't a big deal, and I wanted to just get back to my room. As I got to my floor on the elevator, I looked at each end of the hallway to make sure it was clear, then ran as fast as possible while trying to be quiet. As soon as my door opened, I heard the sound of a door opening up behind me. I turned around to see the man, smiling at me with a hideous grin. He must have been standing at the door, looking through the entire time, waiting for me to return. I screamed at him, "Leave me alone," in which he responded by charging at me. By some miracle, I managed to shut and lock the door, only to hear manic screaming and pounding on the other side. I pulled out my phone and dialed 911, telling them my location and the room number, then explaining the situation. The screaming didn't stop the entire time, but only grew louder. I grabbed the kitchen knife and hid in the walk-in closet, praying that he wouldn't break the door down. Sometime around that point was when it all felt like a blur, and my memory is still blotchy. I snapped out of it when I heard the police yelling at the guy, followed by a knock on the door. I looked through the peephole and saw 3 police officers standing outside, and I opened it up. They took down my name and information, then had me give a statement. I'm assuming that the guy was arrested, and I haven't heard anything since. The front desk clerk assured me that he wouldn't be coming back to the hotel, and I was safe. I didn't sleep that night at all, and was thrown off for the entire weekend of the wedding. It was such a bizarre string of events, but I'm thankful that I was ultimately safe in the end. This happened in the summer of 2010, when I was just entering my teenage years. My family took a trip to a really nice hotel in the city. I can't remember why we decided to take the trip, but I remember a lot of my family friends came along and stayed in adjacent rooms. To preface, I'm a bit of a scaredy cat and always have been. I'm a pretty skinny, fragile kid, so I get spooked pretty easily, even now. This, however, was almost definitely not me freaking myself out like I normally did. Looking back, I'm incredibly lucky I trusted my instincts. This hotel had a strange design to it. The lobby was actually on the 4th floor, not the bottom floor, which I found very strange. To access the lobby, you had to use the elevator. There was no way for you to get to it from the stairs. This information would have been nice before everything happened, as you'll find out. The hotel was organized in a square shape. Every floor was lined with a balcony, and you could look down into the lobby and cafe area from your floor. Essentially, if you were walking to your room, you could be seen from anyone that was on your floor if they just stepped out of their room and looked out. I was always afraid I'd fall over the balcony and sail down 8 stories to my death, but they were high enough to a point where I wasn't too concerned for my safety. The first 2 days were nice. My friends and I hung out and played cards all day. or we watched whatever was on TV. At night, we'd explore the halls of the hotel and tell each other ghost stories. It was a really fun time, even though I didn't fully understand why we were there. On the third day, though, things got strange fast. I woke up to the sound of screaming coming from outside my door. Now, because of the hotel's design I mentioned, sounds from the lobby would echo all the way up to the top of the building. So, when I walked outside to investigate, I immediately looked over the balcony to see what the commotion was about. I saw a girl laying on the ground, surrounded by eggs and milk that had splattered everywhere around her. People were rushing to help her, and I heard a couple people telling each other to call 911. It seemed like the girl was unconscious. Maybe she had passed out or something. I scanned the area below and saw that my family and a couple of my friends were in the lobby, getting breakfast, all staring at the event in front of them. I decided I'd rush down to meet them to find out what happened. The elevator was on the opposite side of my floor, so I took the stairwell located right next to my room. We were on the 7th or 8th floor, so I knew I only had to take about 4 flights down, which wasn't a big deal. I descended for a little while, looking for the number 4 on the wall, or the letter L. I passed floor 5, ready to find a door to the lobby. I took about 2 more flights of steps, before realizing that there hadn't been a door for the 4th floor, nor had there been a door for the 3rd or 2nd. Now, I probably should have turned back, but I continued down because I was tired and didn't want to climb back up. There were some weird side hallways that went into pitch black areas with a bunch of piping and wiring, and though I was curious to explore, I passed them by. I quickly hit the bottom floor, which was a dimly lit and cold room with cinder block walls and concrete floors. In front of me, there was a set of double doors. I hesitated at first, but I assumed that this was just another way back to the lobby, so I opened them and entered. Behind the doors, there was a massive warehouse-type room, probably the size of a smaller basketball stadium. The only light coming in was from the stairwell behind me, so I wasn't really able to see much. Chairs were stacked and covered in plastic wrap. Tables lined the wall, and in the distance, I thought I could see boxes stacked in line against the wall as well. I assumed I was probably in the storage room. I looked around and saw an elevator in the back of the room, so I made my way towards it. I closed the door to the stairwell and began to walk into the dimly lit room. The room was muggy and dusty, and it seemed like nobody had been down there in a long time. As I got closer to the elevator, I noticed it was a little bigger than the elevators in the lobby and other floors. I pressed the up button, but got no response. There was a card swiper next to the button. It must have been for employees only. I turned back towards the stairwell doors, making my way past the chairs and tables along the way. When I got to the door, I gave it a tug. It was locked. Great, I thought to myself. This is when things started to hit me, and I realized I was stuck in the dark, dusty basement of the hotel. I didn't have a phone at the time because my parents wouldn't let me get one until I graduated middle school, so I couldn't call anyone for help. Everyone likely assumed I was still asleep in the room, so I began to freak out, realizing that nobody was going to look for me. I searched around the warehouse, looking for other ways out. Some areas of the place were better lit than others, so I looked around in areas I could see before heading to the darker sides of the room. There was one other set of doors that I found, but it happened to be locked as well. I began to cry, scared that nobody would ever find me in the basement. It felt like hours, but only a handful of minutes passed before I heard the door creak open. It wasn't the door from the stairwell. It was the second door I had found. A slim, middle-aged man in a lab coat came out of the doors. Now, if this was 21-year-old me seeing this man, I would be very confused as to why this guy was wearing a lab coat in a hotel. I was only 12 or 13 at the time, so I immediately was relieved at the sight of an adult who looked smart. I approached him, tears in my eyes, and he immediately looked surprised to see me, as you'd expect. "What are you doing down here?" he yelled. "I got lost on my way down to the lobby, and I've been locked in here. Do you have a key?" I was shaking, eager to get out of there. He didn't answer my question, but instead, he said, "I know a way out of here. Follow me." He began to walk towards the doors with the stairwell, and I followed, relieved that someone had finally come to save me. We approached the doors, and I began to reach for the handle, but he continued walking. "Isn't it right here?" I asked him. I will never forget the look on his face when I said that. He looked nervous, and though it was dim, I could see sweat glistening from his forehead and behind his glasses. "No, this way," he said sternly. I continued to follow him, but I was now nervous myself. We had passed the door to the stairs, and were now headed toward a darker side of the basement, away from the elevators. He looked like he had no clue where he was leading me, as he kept checking around him, almost as if he was taking in his surroundings for the first time. We turned a corner and began walking towards the boxes, seeing that it was a dead end. I immediately froze, realizing that something was very wrong. This guy had no idea where he was going, and he did not appear to work at the hotel. In a trembling voice, I said, "Where are we going?" He turned and said, "This way, just follow me." I knew that there were no doors by those boxes, since I had checked there after I found out the stairwell door was locked. Something in my gut told me I had to do something, so I started yelling as loud as I could. I yelled so loud I gave myself a headache. The man, irritated and plugging his ears, began yelling back at me, "What are you doing? Be quiet." I continued to yell. I don't even remember how long I was yelling. Finally, the man snapped and began quickly walking towards me. I went in a full sprint towards the stairwell doors, hoping that they'd magically open somehow. He didn't run after me, but he walked sternly behind me, muttering under his breath. He walked up to me and threw me up against the wall and began dragging me by my leg to the dark side of the room. I kept screaming, trying to free myself, when somebody bursted through the door. It was a hotel janitor who had heard the screaming from the stairwell. He saw the situation and immediately ran over to the guy, screaming at him to let go. He did, so I got up as fast as I could, where he told me to get behind him. The janitor asked me who the man was, and I told him I had no idea, and explained that he came through the door on the other side of the room, where I pointed to. The janitor radioed into the desk that he found a child in the basement. Then, quietly, so I wouldn't hear, he said, "There's a man down here from outside. Get security." The man in the lab coat started trying to argue with the janitor, claiming that he simply was looking for the bathroom. The janitor clearly wasn't buying it, and told him to wait until security got there, and talk to them about it. I was standing beside him the whole time, trying to take in everything that was happening. Eventually, an employee from the front desk arrived, and took me back up the steps to the lobby, where I met with my family, who surprisingly had no idea I was missing. I told them the story, crying and shaking, and they hugged me tightly. Looking back now, I have absolutely no clue what that man was doing in the basement. I don't have any information as to what happened to him afterwards, or who he was. However, I learned that the door I found led to the street on the side of the building where he must have wandered in from. I have no clue as to what his intentions were, or why he was wearing a lab coat. The only thing I know for sure is if I hadn't screamed my lungs out, I might not have been telling this story. For context, I'm a 22-year-old female. I work for a pretty well-known health club in the northwest of England. I've been on a pretty simple path of self-improvement, while also working part-time and studying at university. Therefore, when my manager asked me if I wanted to do a lifeguard qualification for our poolside, I happily agreed. It was an all-expense-paid trip, so I never would have said no anyway. They'd pay for my travel, which was about an hour away from where I was living, so I was covered for gas, the hotel, food, and the course. The course was set up where we'd go 3 days in a row, take 4 days off, and then 3 days on. The first 3 days went really well. I found my hotel pretty easily, and although it was in a dodgy-looking area, I slept well and the staff were nothing but helpful. I was hoping to return to the same hotel for my last 3 days. However, the day before I was due to return to do my last 3 days, my manager told me that the hotel was fully booked. He quickly booked me another one, which was in the middle of the town center. I looked up the hotel online, and the exterior wasn't very flattering, but I only had to stay there for 2 nights. I went to my first day of lifeguard training as normal, when one of the local girls told me the hotel I was about to stay at had no on-site parking. She also mentioned that all the surrounding car parks only allowed you to stay for 2 hours. She suggested that it would be best to leave my car at the training center and offered to take me to my hotel and pick me up for training each morning. It was very helpful for me in my situation, so I thanked her and took her up on the offer. After finishing for the day, I got into her car and she took me to my hotel. She also mentioned that she used to rent this hotel, which was a small family-run business and not a chain. The hotel didn't serve food, so she told me that McDonald's and Subway were probably my best bet. When I arrived on my first night at the hotel, the lobby seemed nice, although there was construction in all the surrounding rooms. The clerk at the front desk greeted me and began to check me in. She smiled and told me that my room was upgraded, but she didn't know why. I didn't question it, since I was just happy to be in the executive suite. She walked me to my room, which was like a maze. You needed a special key card to get to the executive suites. This meant that other people in the hotel weren't able to access this area. Upon entering my room, I was amazed. I've never been in something so classy. The room was massive, and on the left, there were stairs to the bathroom. There was a balcony, queen-size bed, a couch, TV with Netflix, and a table full of complimentary water, tea, and biscuits. I chilled for a while, and then suddenly realized how hungry I was, and I thought I should make my way over to McDonald's or Subway before it got any darker outside. Everything was great until things started to get weird when I was on my way back from McDonald's. I returned to the hotel, where I got my key card ready to swipe into the executive suites. As I walked up to the door, there was a man standing right next to it, dressed in a suit. We looked at each other for a moment before I walked past and scanned the door open. I automatically regretted it. The man followed me through, very closely. Now I'm a very nervous person. I panic at everything, so of course I panicked when I realized I was being followed. I thought to myself, better be safe than sorry, and literally ran to my room. When I got to the door, I turned my head slightly to see that the man had actually kept up with me. I started to weep as I opened my door extremely clumsily, threw myself in, and slammed the door shut. In retrospect, I probably should have called the front desk. So as to why I didn't, I don't know. At the time, I felt like I'd done the right thing. I eventually calmed myself down and decided to shower, then watch Netflix before bed. I left the bathroom door wide open, which had a clear view to the front door. As I was brushing my teeth, I heard a noise that sounded like it came from the front door. I looked up and instantly felt my heart drop. The door was wide open. I ran to the bathroom door, then slammed it shut and locked it. I sank to the floor and started crying. After a minute or so, I tried getting it together, so I turned off the shower so I could listen closely. Although I expected to hear something, I didn't. It was completely silent. In my panicked state, I messaged my best friend, who replied right away. We texted back and forth for a while, until she convinced me that I probably made it up in my head and to go check it out. I gave her the hotel name and my room number, just in case something happened. I told her that if I didn't reply in 5 minutes, no matter what, to call the police for me. She agreed, and I left the bathroom. As I crept around, everything looked normal. I checked under the bed, balcony, wardrobe, and just about everywhere. It was just me. I thought about manually locking the door with the lock that's normally on hotel room doors, but there wasn't one. This freaked me out a bit, but I laughed at myself, grabbed one of the free bottles of water, and went to sleep shortly after. When I woke up the next day, I got ready quickly because I overslept, grabbed the last bottle of water off the desk, and ran outside to meet the girl who was picking me up for training. After training, I was dropped off at the hotel relatively early to prepare for the next day's assessment. I was pretty overheated, which was only amplified when I walked into my unair-conditioned room. I instantly noticed that none of the complimentary waters had been restocked, so I assumed it was maybe just a one-off, considering I didn't pay full price for the room. I laid down and relaxed for maybe 30 minutes, feeling exhausted from the heat. I don't even remember falling asleep, but I passed out. I was quickly awakened to a loud slam. I felt groggy and didn't open my eyes right away. When I did, it took my eyes a few seconds to adjust. I brushed it off quickly until I sat up straight. My eyes focused on the table, which was now full of complimentary water. Next to me, I realized there was a black ankle sock that was definitely not mine. I looked around and realized that one of the pairs of socks I had in my suitcase was missing a sock. It was like someone took off their sock and put on mine. My mind automatically thought it had to be staff. Therefore, I didn't complain to management. This wasn't a chain hotel where a creepy employee could be held accountable. I barricaded myself into the room and barely slept that night. Upon checkout, an elderly man was at the desk who I had only ever seen in passing. He asked if I liked my room. I tried to be polite and told him yes, which I began to question myself about again. He told me that my manager had rang the day before I arrived, and he decided to give me a quiet room to myself, which he, in quote, likes to do for the younger girl. He then asked me to leave a good review. I began to feel uneasy again, but had my lifeguard assessment that day, so I pushed it to the back of my mind. I ended up passing and drove home. It wasn't until I was sitting in my own bed that the situation really hit me. Something wasn't sitting right with me. So I went on the hotel's TripAdvisor, something I should have done at the start. Out of the 4 reviews I read, I bothered to read any further before feeling too sick to continue. 3 contained a warning to women. Men were trying to get into their rooms, and staff would walk in unannounced. Even when they were confronted, the staff would deny it. This was when I knew I had not made what happened up in my head. People, or a person, had been coming into my room while I slept, staying for an unknown period of time, stealing my clothing. It still sends chills down to my spine just thinking about it. I let my managers know, who have made a complaint against the company, but so far, nothing has come back. I don't know what else to do about the situation,